I became a monk at a young age. I think I might have been 27 or 8, country of Burma. I had a dedicated fantasy, having done so much LSD when I was in high school and in college, that I got sick of coming down from that hallucinogenic high. And the natural trajectory was to try to understand this dimensionality of inner beingness in this wacky, mysterious context called infinity by an organic method. And for me, Buddhist meditation, mindfulness meditation became the natural embodiment of how to uh, become my own NASA, uh, my own astronautic exploration of a world beyond my own gravity of fear, anger, delusion, self-centeredness, narcissism. And so I went to that monastery pretty much as a full-fledged addict in need of survival. I was living in Los Angeles, where I was an artist, and became immersed and embedded and dysfunctional within a whole range of different addictions, from alcohol to synthetic morphine to cocaine to cigarettes to sexuality, the obsession to paint. And so on the other hand, Burma became my rehab center. And I just, from day one, shaved my head, wore the robes, no sexuality, no masturbation, 20 hours of meditation a day, total silence, 2 meals a day, no food after 12 noon. And my life as a monk was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. I met people there that just opened my heart. I loved the silence. I loved coming off all these various substances. And I became OCD on mindfulness. This is the Sema Hall where I had the blessings to take my formal higher ordination as a monk. I think it was on the full moon in August 1979. Here we have the bathing well. Winter, summer, spring, fall, always cool, no matter what. Put your robe on. Wow, those were the days. And here are some of the older meditation cottages at the Mahasi Yekta, the originals. You know, living in a Burmese monastery, the Mahasi Meditation Center in Rangoon, it is severe. Day one, 4 hours sleep maximum with the daily injunction, reduce, reduce, reduce. At that time, you weren't allowed to use cushions. There were no screens on the windows of the meditation hall. 1 hour sitting, 1 hour walking, up at 3 a.m. You had to stay up until 11 p.m. People watched you sitting, watched you walking. They wouldn't let you go back to your room. Ooh, the mosquitoes were large, like MiG jets, and no cushions. And you are boiling. You are absolutely beyond yourself with struggle. I was overly sensitized from this experience. And I remember coming back to my room one night just crying, really weeping, because I was confronting the best kept secret of all: my fear, my desire, my self-identity, my ability to run from myself. And I remember sitting on my bed just kind of crying and hearing these dogs outside of my window growling. I went out there with my flashlight with this kind of arrogant sense of like, what's going on? Why are you intruding me here in my last moment of peace? And this mother dog had 6 or 7 puppies that were completely just newborn, scrambling for a nipple. And they had never seen the light of day, and yet they had these interior qualities of greed and anger and stress and competition. I just saw myself in that young puppy with my blindedness to my own mind, wanting that nipple to just soothe my pain. And I finally realized my first insight is how I project judgment and blame on the world and don't really own my own state of mind. I was thrown out of Burma 4 times by the dictatorship, reasons unknown to me. Probably thought I was CIA. When I was thrown out of Burma the final time, I finally disrobed, and I was really heartbroken. Just brings me to tears thinking about it. That this was my family, this was my spiritual home. I really loved them so much. But I couldn't stay, and I couldn't leave as a monk. It was too hard to take that monastic form into the world. And so I disrobed and I cried. There was a taxi waiting. And my teacher, God bless his heart, he said, Alan, the form is useful, but it's awareness that liberates. Know that the seeds of purification are within you, he said. Nurture them and you will awaken. To me, that is the theology of timelessness. The form is useful, but it's awareness that liberates. And I left that monastery and went back into America, the culture that I loathed. I loathed the capitalistic killing machine. I loathed what we did in war zones in Vietnam. I loathed it. And here I was going right back into a country that I did not want to be in. And I was so sensitized. There was no notion whatsoever at that time of integrating any of this. And I felt really naked in America, naked in Australia, naked in the European Union or Europe at that time. I felt naked as a man and vulnerable. And I rented a place and I could just kind of hear the hum, technological hum. Everything was on a meter, the rent, the water, the electricity, the gasoline, the car. My mind was all of a sudden becoming commercialized to this endless meter. And I felt so co-opted by this great machinery that I began to adapt through, I would call it the second great coming of my addictions, which were to numb this incessant technological capitalistic hum. It's over the top consumption, this deafening roar of consumerism, capitalism, and greed, and the locomotive, the servers required to keep Facebook denial constantly regenerating, this huge, huge engine of consumption that is not separate from me. That is so terrifyingly heartbreaking to think that we have created a circumstance that we're embedded in of an immeasurable, self-annihilating addiction. In 1992 or so, I was invited to write a film by a very dear friend of mine in Los Angeles, exploring the notion of love in the time of genocide. And my friend at the time was working for the United Nations Refugee Resettlement Program in Bosnia-Herzegovina, part of the former Yugoslavia. And I went there and found myself based in Zagreb as a student of politics, as a student of human rights, as a student of trying to understand man's inhumanity to man, and how could good people, beautiful people, educated people, in such a short period of time become indoctrinated in the hypnosis of religion and ideology and Allah and Catholicism and the Greek Orthodox Church. And me as a Buddhist, how could we become ideologically drunk and stone deaf to the humanity of others and take up war to the point of committing genocide in the name of my Buddha, my Allah, my Christ, my Jesus, my fear, my anger, my denial, my democracy, my American need for whatever. And I had my mind and heart completely shattered during that time. I remember one time, just post-war, I was with my friend, and we went out to Srebrenica, the place where 8,000 Muslim men and boys were separated from the women and massacred by the Bosnian Serb paramilitary. And that was a scene beyond apocalypse. Just to be there in that type of putrefying human flesh and the sickness of human behavior to act out these atrocities. And I remember that day, mile after mile of just horror. We stopped one time in the afternoon, and there was UN personnel exhuming these mass graves. And sure, it was a hallucination, but it was real enough. I imagined a hand sticking out of the earth with a ring on its finger, and it could have been me, it could have been a woman, it could have been a man, it could have been a Buddhist, it could have been God, it could have been any human being from any religion, and they lost their family. And I imagined what it would be like to put myself in the mind and body of the assassins, the killers, and put myself in the mind and body of the ones who were killed. And I reflected, I remember that day near Srebrenica, and asked myself the question, could I do this very thing that's so disgusting, so grotesque? And I envisioned being killed, I envisioned killing, and I could do both. And it was at that point in Srebrenica, on that day, that I dropped my relationship to Buddhism. I gave up Buddhism, I gave up ism, I gave up the dogma of my life, and gave birth for the first time, cliched as it sounds, to deep unknowing, deep mystery, deep vulnerability. And I wanted to safeguard my mind from ever assuming I ever knew for sure something about the nature of capital truth. And I wanted to cease and desist any involvement in my participation, knowingly or unknowingly, in violence. And so at that point, I made a very dedicated vow to do all that I possibly could in this life to erode any complicity anywhere with the denigration, the exploitation, or the violation of life, planetary, human, animal, bird, God, whatever it is that we're embedded in.
Alan, you were in Bosnia, and you saw that Bosnia today, I mean, what's expected is that the three groups will be able to live together in peace and harmony, despite the fact that during this horrific war, all sorts of things, your neighbor who was of a different ethnic group may have committed atrocities against your family, or you, and now you're expected to forgive and live in peace. How do you get to the point where you can do that?
Oh, these questions are so large. I mean, the miracle in South Africa happened. People who killed and maimed sat for 3 years in the Truth Council and opened up to their atrocities. Forgiveness is a possibility. I have a friend in Burma who was severely interrogated in his incarceration, somewhat tortured, and among the interrogators, one man was particularly violent, and this friend was given a long-term solitary prison term as a leader. And somewhere into the 10th year of his 15 or 20-year term, that the interrogator who most viciously interrogated him must have fallen out of favor and was put in prison. And where did they put him? They put him in the very prison cell of the person he tortuously interrogated. And my friend told me that this was an epic moment, to have him both in the cell and to know that his deepest sense of spirituality was in transcendence of separation and the empowerment of reconciliation. And here it was right in front of him. And he saw this man who was once so prominent and mean cower like a scared rat in the cell, curled up like in a fetal position and kind of whining like a young child. And he could see in his own mind's eye that he was suffering from his recognition of shame in having done wrong. And slowly in time, he began to talk with him and heal this great divide. And he felt so, not vindicated wasn't the word, but so empowered in his act of conscience on why he was imprisoned. And yet it wasn't fulfilled until he began to see that in this severe interrogation of his torturer, he actually could not only forgive, but he could become friends with. These are epic circumstances that give me hope in my life to not justifiably divide people out of my life, no matter who they are, to take the extra step towards forgiveness and reconciliation. So my heart calls out, the deepest levels of me calls out to what my teacher and I talked about in the book, The Requisites of Reconciliation, how to step into the heart of the enemy tenderly, respectfully, with resilience and commitment and honesty, and the emergence of forgiveness, accountability, and to say and do things that actually don't give up on her, don't give up on them, don't give up on the dictator, don't give up on your former lover, that in that empowerment you heal and potentially keep offering an olive branch of healing to the one whom you feel violated you. I think there's something very, very beautiful about establishing a new Bible there, a new Quran, a new Tipitaka in the Buddhist tradition, a new Rumi that is willing to go out into that area that's gray and dark and bring the light of your conscience and forgiveness to an area that is so commonly just written off as incurable. That I don't know where you stand in that area, but I so applaud those who forgive. And not just forgive, but hold hands, to give gifts, to celebrate the victory of enemies becoming friends. What inspired Spiritually Incorrect? January 4th, 1996, Rangoon, Burma. I was invited to Aung San Suu Kyi's house. I was doing a book of conversations with her called The Voice of Hope. And it was Independence Day, the day in which her father, Aung San, many years before, negotiated Burma's independence from Britain with Prime Minister Clement Attlee. He was assassinated shortly thereafter. And Aung San Suu Kyi had just been released from 6 years of house arrest. She invited a number of different people to her home, I think up to 400 people, to celebrate freedom within a totalitarian government. Most of these people had been imprisoned and tortured. It was a very amazing event. The energy was high. Throughout the day, there was a stage at the front of her home there where actors and readers and poets and dancers and ethnic musical groups played and celebrated this freedom of consciousness. Throughout the day, though, many people took to the stage and brought humor and satire and comedy. But at the end of the day, the stage curtains opened, and my translator told me, this is Burma's preeminent spoken word satirist and comedian. His name is U Parlay. He is Burma's Jim Carrey, Burma's Robin Williams. And the audience lost it. And he told me, my translator, that everyone here assumed that U Parlay was still in prison. Apparently, he had been incarcerated for 6 years pounding rocks, hard to imagine, pounding rocks with arm irons and leg irons on his body, 20 hours a day, I was told, for simply a 60-minute, 90-minute gig where he satirized Burma's Big Brother. Burma, of course, maybe you know that George Orwell lived in Burma. He wrote the book Burma Days. They say the seeds of 1984 were rooted during his 3 years as a policeman in Burma. So Uparle and the spoken word tradition in Burma is deeply infiltrated with the breaking of the coma of orthodoxy and conformity and servitude to structures of limitation and bondage within and also outside. So it's the spoken word of anti-slavery and anti-addiction and anti-conformity. And it was mind-blowing to see these people, all of whom were risking their freedom, their lives, their jobs, to be in Aung San Suu Kyi's home, to participate in this collective celebration of freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and defiance of dictatorship. Well, Uparle took to the microphone, and I was told by my translator that he said that for 6 long years he'd been pounding rocks, waiting for this moment to perform again, to satirize Burma's Big Brother. And it just simply blew my mind that here I had been practicing meditation for all these years of being in this moment now, being in this moment now, be here now, the power of now, here, 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 here. And for 6 years, he's been waiting to get out of that moment to use his voice to transform society. And my translator told me that the next thing he said was that I know that what I'm about to do will land me back in prison, but freedom is more important than fear. And he rocked out for 60 minutes. And all of a sudden, at the end of the show, I was told a day or two later that Uparle, in fact, was rearrested for 6 more long years, pounding rock, 20 hours a day with arm irons and leg irons. And it blew my mind. And at that time, I had this vision in my heart, maybe you have it too, that what would I say to my fellow inhabitants if I had 60 minutes left to speak? And that was the birth of Spiritually Incorrect. And thank you, Uparle. I had the good chance of meeting him after his last incarceration. I asked him, sir, how did you manage those last 6 years pounding rocks? What got you through the darkest times? And he looked me straight in the eye and said, I never let them own my mind. Do everything you can to own your freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and keep using your voice to confront injustice, totalitarian structures inside and outside. Thank you, Uparle. I do a show called Spiritually Incorrect where the essential theme of it is to illuminate how we lie to ourselves. And I have no other place to look than my own life to see the ways that I've been in self-deceit and how I have been a hypocrite. What does it take to own your mind? I mean, go right in there to the very core of your being tonight and ask yourself, are you living honestly? Honestly. Who would say they're not living honestly? You don't have to repeat what it is, but who is not living honestly in the room? Up again, baby. Time to stand. If you're not living honestly, please stand up. I remember very distinctly, must have been in 86 or 87, I don't know exactly when my double life became the predominant feature of my teaching career. But I would go out and do my teaching gig to a group of 50, 100, sometimes 150 people, and I'd speak quite eloquently, and I felt very sincerely about the power of meditation and silence and what a special opportunity it is here on day 3 of this to just drop in and to go more slowly. And I'd find myself going back to my room, and I'd be reading, I'd be bored with reading, I'd be bored with wanting to go back out there and teaching meditation. And so I started to do drugs again. What are you not coming clean about? Where are you in some fraudulence? Let me give you a few little hints of possibility. How many in the room have watched porn in the last 6 months? If you are standing, raise a hand. If you are sitting, stand up. This is a moment, guys. I remember even there was one guy, Larry, who was notoriously just fraught with anxiety. Every time he came to my retreat, he would just sit there and just kind of shake. And then remember at one retreat, Larry was like, "Whoa, man, you're like a Buddha. Well, how did you get to be so still?" And he told me that he was just doing this new substance called Prozac. And it just, after about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, he was like a sustained low dose MDMA and a composure. He said, "I've never felt so calm and composed." And so I went to a psychiatrist friend and got some. And I have to admit, I was one of the first people that used Prozac as a recreational drug. And it really increased my teaching skills. How many of you have fantasized about having sex with another partner than the one you're with? So that double life kind of emerged into a triple life and into a quadruple life, where the predominant aspect of my life was in my pleasure and in my denial. And I began to see for the first time, when it finally hit a quadruple 0.5 life, that I was absolutely a bona fide hypocrite. I was lying now to myself and lying to people who came to me. How many of you lie to people? I want to know. I want to really know these people. Proudly put it up. Come on. Just say, "I lie." Come on now, say it. "I lie. I lie." Don't stop now, because you just fucking save your career in a monastery. And that's when I gave it up. This was pre-88. I gave up teaching. I gave up being a Buddhist, and only came back to it in a much more human way, in which the bottom line is, don't follow me. These are the things I've learned, and be your own agent. And all of us are class act hypocrites, because every one of us consume, use fossil fuels, electricity, and guess what? All of us are basically of the same position of being complicit with mass murder. People often identify the spiritual life with being present. Right here. Right now, 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 now. If you're a good Buddhist meditator, it's not like one eternal now. It's like lots of nows. In one movement of the arm, there's like 10,000 nows. And as my mom said, Alan, even assassins can be in the moment. You've got to be in intelligence. You've got to understand context. Do you think you want another copy of The Power of Now? Now like that works every now and again, but not every now. Every now is murder. Murder. Do not take being in the moment seriously. You think it's funny, don't you? So the now is way too small a place, and for God's sake, what about the future? I mean, look at all of us embedded in this, quote, homicidal economy, and how we were so present with our foot pedal on the gas of our denial that we have killed potentially habitat in the future of life by being immeasurably present. So break the coma, consider the future. The past is worthy of investigation. Look at the people who've spent so many years and decades espousing being in this moment now. Eye contact. The cult of me looking at you, looking back at me, mindfully looking at me, when in fact, how many American Indians told us way back when we were kids, look at the present on how it influences 7 generations of life out. Right now, how many of you are present? How many of you make a vocation out of being in the now? How many times have you heard power of fucking now? How many of you live to be in the fucking now? What about the future? I've got a 12-year-old fucking daughter that tells me, "Dad, you fucking lived in the now so fucking much, there's no future." Non-attachment, like the second noble truth of the Buddha's teaching, that attachment is the root cause of suffering. But I frankly think it's overrated to talk about non-attachment. I mean, in my life, there are things to be radically attached to, radically bonded with. I mean, someone's stealing your child and you do everything imaginable, right, to interrupt that incredible tragedy. You run, you spend your whole life. You're clinging onto the side of a building and you're holding on to get out of a terrorist attack. You're clinging to the side of the Empire State Building with all of your might, and you're practicing Buddhism. Let go, let go. No, you're holding on. I mean, there are times to hold them, times to run, times to cling, yeah, there's every variation on intelligence is appropriate. And more of the school I come from is use your mindful intelligence to discern the best course of action. Thank you, my daughter, for having me as your dad. And thank you, daughter, for reminding me that you are all life. And thank you, daughter, for reminding me that I can participate in the parenting and in the learning from all life. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You can trace the mindfulness movement right back to the Mahasi Mindfulness Meditation Center, at that time in Yangon or Rangoon, Burma, started by the Prime Minister U Nu, taught by Mahasi Sayadaw, who was my preceptor and teacher as a monk. Mahasi Sayadaw was considered one of the greatest scholars in the world. I think he wrote something like 75 books. He was the chief questioner at the Sixth Great Buddhist Council. Thus are the traditional Buddhist texts, their commentaries, and other literature that he collected over his years that became his personal library. Mindfulness keeps us in the artistry of self-development. Otherwise, we're in thought, and we tend to live in the ideation of name and form, and we often forget that we're in self-development. We lose our Dharma artistry. So the point being is, what is mindful intelligence, and how well can I learn to occupy that as the priority of my life? Mindfulness is ubiquitous today in corporate Forbes 500. I think it's in Google and Facebook and American Express. It's probably even in the White House, and I know it's probably in the military. And drone, amen. Civilians, kill them. Keep the stress at bay. And okay, cool. But if there isn't like radical discernment and independent inquiry and deep questioning and reasoning of the circumstances that we're embedded, to see who we are, where we are, what we're doing, and to see a context and a discernment of the appropriateness and the skillfulness, the right and the wrong of any given decision, we have to use our mind, we have to use our thought. Anyone mindful here? Let's practice some mindfulness together. Mindful of your thoughts, mindful of my mind, watching my mind, watch my mind, mindful of my thoughts, my taste, watching, eating, meditation, keeping your hand off your dick, mindful of my mind, mindful of my mind, sound, things, mindful of my mind, eating, keep my hand off my dick, mindful of mind, mindful of my mind, obsessing about her, mindful of my mind, mindful. I'm just really untouched by anything because I'm just so fucking mindful. Oh, mindful, my name, mindful, I'm just mindful of my mind, mindful of my mind, mindful of my mind. What do you do for a living? I'm just mindful of my mind, mindful, and I'm being in this moment now, mind, in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath. And you teach this bullshit to people, they love it. Without conscious stress, there's no hope for a future. Okay? So it's a deep pacification. Meditation is often taught as a deep pacification of all things important to actually excite. If you look in America today, Forbes 500, most of those 500 are corporate criminals. And they've co-opted the meditation thing essentially to keep the minions in the ranks quiet. When in fact, they're building bombs to kill the future. Literally. And so in a way, many of the people who are pacifying this stress, they really just simply should ask the question, what in the fuck am I doing in this job? So massive civil disobedience is called for today. And meditation, if not rightly felt, is complicit with the propaganda of sublimation of the very anxiety that's actually the good news of transformation. Passion. There's lots of things that we need to do other than just simply being present and reducing our stress and belonging to the cult of corporate capitalistic global annihilation for the sake of becoming more efficient and more productive. You know, in my life, stress is actually really good news. It means that you might not like what you're doing. And depression has been actually one of my greatest allies because it's really shown me the absolute dysfunction of belonging to a society. As Krishnamurti says, you know, it's no measure of success to be profoundly adjusted to a sick society, except to be mindful of the stress and mindful of anxiety and mindful of your depression and become very effective in the clog of continuing the apparatus of capitalistic killing. How in the hell did we get into what's called a homicidal economy, where all of us have our foot on the pedal, all driving at high speed into a future that looks catastrophic? How did we get into this fixation of all being so consumed by an addiction that we're even unaware of, when in fact everything is connected to the capitalist system that we're embedded in and how we fucking live? Having recognized in my life that the true meditation is decoding from my consciousness the primordial forces of fear, greed, and anger. Meditation has come to mean that all times, all places, all postures, all context. And I meditate because I want to remind myself of the importance of decoding my collusion, my participation with the slavery of denigration. Are you with me? Fear, greed, anger, and delusion. If there's one gift I've seen in my life, it's the power of mindfulness. And yes, meditation has been remarkably important for me. But today, it is everywhere, always, all states, all conditions, staying sensitive to feeling the collusion of my own delusion and how I justify the projection of fear, of greed, and delusion, and take it off of people of the world and come back, bring those phantasms home, and do what I can to elevate the good, the true, and the beautiful. I'm in Byron Bay. It's the new fucking Ladakh of the world, the new Benares. I'm going to let it out. I said, Bhakti and Ram, you guys have known me for a long time. It's been hard, really hard. It's been tough. Gone through a big breakup. I've lost my book deal in Burma. I lost a film deal with Netflix. Things are fucked, frankly. And I'm going off in Santos up there, which is the organic capital of Byron. And the people are looking at me like this, going, God, he used the fuck word publicly. And I realized that this is really kind of inappropriate to be using expletives in an organic vegetarian store. Especially with Uber, super seeker, Land Rover driving, Mala B dripping, Om tattooed, fucking sycophantic, narcissistic Instagram fucking wind-up dolls. And here I'm going like, and they looked at me, they had the fucking audacity to tell me, Alan, you of all people, know that you create your own reality. What I wanted to do was like, what I did in my mind was to fucking smile. I went, fuck you, Bhakti. Fuck you, Ram. Bend over, take it in God's ass. Fuck you. You're rich, I'm poor. You're telling me I create my own fucking reality? I've been in war zones. Girls who've been mass raped did not create their fucking reality, dickhead. You fucking spiritual wanker. But no, my fucking sorry ass me, what did I do? Oh, yeah, create your own reality. Yeah. You know, take on the accoutrements of looking like a spiritual person, take on a name change, get a mala, get christened by the Dalai Lama, get some crystals, join the yoga class, and you're fucking free of anxiety. Who wouldn't be? Jesus Christ, a new breed of spiritual materialists
cosmetic spiritual circuitry, and all of a sudden you Botox that fucking sorry ass ego of yours right back into the oblivion of everyone else's ego.
You gotta be very careful of leaving your discernment, your independent thinking for the seduction of the ideology of an emotional dopamine, just like your iPhone or your fucking other kind of phone. And all of a sudden you're swiping, liking, and hashtagging all against your fucking better interest because you want to belong and to fit into the groovy cult at Yoga Barn and the workshops in Canggu, and you want to be a fucking ridiculous Instagram influencer with your fucking 67,000 fucking followers wearing a fucking namaste tattoo of your fucking yoni. Fuck you. Fuck you, Canggu. Fuck you, influencers. You should do everything you can to de-influence your account. The more people that unfollow you, the better off you'll be. And so part of my deal is how do I fucking get out of my own skin and get over the meditative conundrum of me working on me, the cult of self, the cult of self-improvement, the cult of me developing Alan, constantly being mindful of me, being watchful of my own thoughts. Me being in mindful proximity to my thoughts, my intimacy, me doing my yoga, constantly being aware of the authenticity of my fucking downward-facing dog, my fucking pigeon, my tree, my fucking bullshit, constantly be doing Alan asana on the yoga mat of his own egoism. Even a paraplegic should be able to do yoga, fair enough? And we must manifest that and take every bit of pressure off performance. I don't give a shit what you say, to the point where teacher trainings should be abandoned and simply share the asana of authenticity freely. And I'm calling for the non-commerciality of psychology, of sexuality, of the Dharma, and of yoga. End of fucking story. Take the money out of it. Tarot, all the various crystal ball shit, and all the various things that you think of as that you have some insight into that which you don't, is just like Taurus in the sky of your bullshit. It's called magical thinking. So just come down off that lie, give everyone back in your life their money back, and stop that crap. And so you project your ideas almost like images on the cave walls of your own mind, and you assume those astrological people, event, systems to be true, but they're in fact just constellations of thought that have no real basis in reality. So you blame, judge, and scapegoat are the first three things you see as a monk or a nun. How easy it is to assume that the dog barking is creating your disturbance, or that the cocaine is the problem, the alcohol is the problem, she is a seductress, whatever it may be. And so you assume 100% responsibility. So you're constantly watching how you construct blame, judgment, and scapegoating righteously. My dad, bless his heart, 85 years old, we're in front of this, all my family, my brother, his wife, my mom, the children, the grandchildren, a lot of people, and my dad saying, you know, Alan, I think I might become religious. I said, what? Well, Mom's telling me that after 54 years of marriage, it's high time that I consider going back to church. You haven't been except the day we got married. And so he told me this in front of everyone. He says, you know, I have to give this religion thing a go. And so I decided, well, if I'm going to go to church, at least I should have the integrity to have read the Bible first. Fair enough? Very beautiful comment. He said he went down Walmart. They were having a 2-for-1 sale. Totally, not even tongue-in-cheek, a 2-for-1 sale. Alan, you're not going to believe this. I started reading this damn thing. This is a recipe for genocide. He went on to say, I understand now why George W. feels divinely inspired to act on God's will. This is not some God I'm going to follow. And it was remarkable to me that my dad, an open-minded person, basically felt this way. And this is basically how I've been feeling. I mean, if the Buddha were to return today, there's no doubt he wouldn't be a Buddhist. Just like Mark Twain said, if Christ were to return, he wouldn't be a Christian. There's a crisis in my heart, a crisis of spirituality. A crisis of spirituality that doesn't find salvation in a book, in a practice, in a technique. You know, there's so much carnage on the shoreline of teachers and gurus, predation. Just using their power, using their manipulation, using their charm, using their money, using their other students to violate other individuals. And so the question becomes for a lot of us is, how do we minimize that? How do we challenge it when we see it? And how do we heal from it when it happens? And it's the study to me of the machinations of enabling, of collusion, of mutual delusion.
May we do whatever is required to go right down in deep as possible to the genome of this existence, beyond all the dogma, beyond all the belief, all the artifice, whatever it is, way down deep into the God molecule, wherever we find ourselves. And may we find the courage, the wisdom to inject into the very deepest recesses of entheogenic, transcendent, multidimensionality existence, wherever it originated, the genome of violence. May we decode that fucking structure and dedicate our lives to a non-violent, sacred world where we don't have to fucking fear that our boys and girls are being fucked on the altar of a religion.
I am outraged that there isn't a Catholic Me Too movement, maybe it is, where the Pope on down and all those bishops and archbishops and all those priests for so long in a pedophilia cult, that we tolerate that cult coexisting with basic human decency, with all of those billions, perhaps trillions of dollars in real estate around the world owned by the Vatican, that we let that citadel of hypocrisy and predation exist. And the same thing within the Buddhist church. For God's sake, look at the hierarchy of Buddhist teachers. Why is all this predation going on in the name of enlightenment? Does it happen in Ubud? Does it happen at Yoga Barn and at workshops here? All over America and Europe and Australia today, it is rampant. The most endorsed teachers in the Tibetan tradition today, I want to bring it out of the shadows. The most endorsed teachers, the most best-selling Tibetan teachers, Sogyal Rinpoche, the book of the Tibetan Living and Dying, 2 million copies, 60 languages, 37 years of sexual violence to his students in the name of enlightenment, endorsed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. No different than our beloved Pope endorsing Mr. Pell in Melbourne for his decades of unrepentant pedophilia, sodomy. Unthinkable, isn't it? All in the name of transcendent, awakened truth. Quite frankly, I think the greatest gift that people in roles of power in any form of spirituality and religion today can do for us is to resign and to go into a period of healing and encourage everyone within their own cult to come clean, make apologies, and just show by example, I refuse to participate in these cults of predation, from the Pope to the Dalai Lama to the Islamic world, to the Catholic world, to the Hindu world, to the yogic world, to the Vipassana world. Let's stop violence by showing by example that we ourselves as leaders refuse to participate anymore in our own narcissism, our own denial, and the propagation of our cult. Resign immediately and give us a gift of spiritual salvation. You know, when I really think, Fanny, of my study of Eastern mysticism and Buddhism, Catholicism, Christianity, it's like there's so much of this religious-based orthodoxy that espouses hell-based religions and equally heaven-based religions. And I'm really like, we must have a moratorium on hell and heaven and begin to see that really what we need to do as human beings is enter human existence and steward our own planet and to understand how to coexist together and overcome these fantasies of a life to come or a fear of a life in these hell realms. Spiritual propaganda, sacred cows, are as alive as the individual who speaks them doesn't know what they're saying. It becomes propaganda. If it's rooted in egoism, pride, fear, narcissism, greed, it becomes propaganda. It becomes like the parasitic. You're sucking from someone your own neurotic need. And so I think that the issue is not religion per se. It's the diabolical need of the human psyche to fuse with its concepts, to think that they're ultimately right, and at the same time fuse with the arrogance of making someone else ultimately wrong. Enlightenment is a propaganda. Religion is a propaganda. Totality is a propaganda. I know, with a capital K, absolute is a propaganda. The self-certainty of me holding myself above you is a propaganda. Anyone who says they're enlightened is basically full of shit. 100%. Anyone who says they've got a handle or a hold on the absolute, if you use the word absolute in your life, you are full of shit. Quote me. A fully enlightened mind in the Buddhist tradition is the absolute absence of fear, the absolute absence of anger, the absolute absence of greed. I mean, who do we know who has the absolute absence of delusion? Even with your eyes being carved out, there's no fear. Who do we know like that? So no, I've never met anyone claiming that. There's only Westerners who write best-selling books that claim guides to enlightenment. The Asians, the masters that I've met from Burma, the Buddhists, don't claim that at all. They're just the opposite. Spiritual narcissism is rampant. And I think it would behoove all priests and teachers and pundits, religious figures, anyone out there that thinks that they have a hold or a clarity on anything about the nature of being in this mysterious madness that we're embedded, to start sharing from the point of view of what the fuck I don't know. And I think from time immemorial, the human has concocted creation myths and superstitions and grand delusions and cast them, if you will, on the inside of their own cave of their consciousness, and considered those illusions cast upon the walls of their own brain to be absolute truths or ultimate realities. But when you really question deeply the nature of the human experience, well, one of the first insights that I had coming back to the West, thinking that I was an enlightened Buddhist teacher, was, you know something, you ever met someone with Alzheimer's? I said, Jesus, I never really thought that unconditioned total understanding of the cosmos was conditioned by a 3-pound fucking brain. And all of a sudden, just by the deterioration of nerve endings, you could forget your own name. How much more so forget your own enlightenment? I said, wow, what kind of fantasy is that? And that was like the first crack in my opening to understand how it was that I was selling the cult of hierarchy, selling the cult of certainty. That's why religion is so rockin' today, because it serves a beautiful fundamental purpose. It seems to assuage the existential terror of being a vulnerable human being, clueless in this universe. We are clueless. Are you with me on that? Big time clueless on this little tiny sphere spinning through eternity, 4 billion years old. Where did life come from? Where is it going? I'll tell you, just pick your head up, give up your superstition, give up your little pet gurus, give up your little pet moment in the moment now, power now, give up your little yoga class, give it all up, just like they gave it up in Sarajevo. All the rich had to become poor, and all of a sudden you have to, oh God, I've got to feel the nature of being vulnerable and open and clueless simultaneously. Give me an evangelical Christian any day so I can overcome this unbelievable terror of having to face the mystery. I think it was Noam Chomsky who said the best form of spirituality is to practice spiritual self-defense, not to be co-opted by the structures that be and ideologies and magical thinking, and do what you can to safeguard the ground of discernment. And it's better to doubt, I think, far better to doubt than it is to be certain. And as Elie Wiesel said, the great Nobel Peace Laureate, keep alive the question. There are no absolute answers. And to constantly keep alive the fertility, the organic role of deep questioning. So spiritual self-defense to me is the best art form to safeguard the beauty of the human life. How do people give up being followers of corrupted teachers and leaders and gurus? I would say that it's a messy process of coming unglued and seeing how we're complicit a lot of the time with denial and projection and predation. I mean, gurus become gurus because they're students and followers. Students and followers that are susceptible to hypnosis have gurus and teachers who lead them like sheep to the precipice of their own denial, and either they wake up or they go over the cliff.
People bow down and they throw dollars at you, $100. They put donations on credit cards. They offer you cars. They offer you women. They offer you cocaine. Whatever you want, it's yours when you're a spiritual teacher. And so I was like lapping this up. I was just an ordinary fucking thumbs up monk in Burma. I come back to the West like I'm somebody.
How do you determine the authenticity of a spiritual teacher? Try it out. Next time you're in the company of a spiritual teacher, someone who calls himself a teacher is already suspect. But if you're in the company of someone who calls himself a spiritual teacher, a shaman, a guru, ask them, please sir, please madame, may I understand how you have seen self-deception operate in your life? Would you please reveal to me the circumstances on how you discovered self-deception and what did you learn? And see what kind of answer you get. That to me would be very revealing, to have a teacher or a guide, anyone really, all of us as friends, talk about what we don't know, how we learned what we don't know, and how we lie to ourselves, and even become even more intimate. Have you ever seen narcissistic tendencies in your life? Sir, have you ever seen how you don't walk your talk? Sir, madame, are you saying things to your students or your clients that on the one hand encourage them to believe something that you're saying while you're doing something somewhat opposite behind their back? And just ask leading questions like that. And if someone says to you, yes, indeed, what a beautiful question, this is how I've seen my hypocrisy, to me that's the mark of a probably genuine spiritual friend. Not a teacher, but a friend, where we can kind of dance in this music of shared vulnerability and just do something that's never been done before, called honesty. So much of my show, Spiritually Incorrect, and so much I pray of this film is about not giving up. And regardless of the circumstances, the emotions, no matter how much they lied, no matter how legitimate the blame and the judgment is of being cheated, of being thrown on the rocks of their manipulation, and you bought, you drank the poison, you willingly went down the road of collusion, enabling, or denial. There's just something, call it an act of grace, an act of conscience, that I would call it the true warrior, the true spiritual being, the true psychonaut, listens to her heart, listens to that intuitive place in his heart, and says, you know, I'm going to turn this around. Doesn't go as far as to say thank you to the narcissist alone, or the cheat, or the violator, or the rapist. But I'm going to make wine out of this. I'm going to give life to my greatness. I was thinking today, my best friend of nearly 30 years,
infinitely more famous than I am.
Robert Chardoff. He's known for all the 7 Rocky movies. He died last year at the age of 80. We were tight, brothers, mentors, best friends. We traveled the world together. I married he and his wife. Everyone knows the story of Rocky. Alan, you can do it. No matter who you think you are, no matter what you've perceived as the limits of your past, you are entitled to a second chance, a third chance. You can do anything that you want to do. That really played into my mind as a mentor, but it wasn't easy to manifest. He once told me, Alan, you must become messy. Life is flawed. It's disruptive. It's not going to happen on your terms. You must be prepared for the bad, the ugly, and the disastrous, and turn that into the victory of emotional integrity.
At the core of this show that I do, Spiritually Incorrect, I would say it's about self-worth, regardless of your realizations, that it's innate, deepening, and it becomes alive to the extent that we nurture him and her inside of us, that we respect our foibles, our flaws, our humanness. We come down off the justification of self-judgment and self-blame, and we honor that vulnerable, beautiful edge of our own beingness. Call it self-esteem, self-worth. I want to learn to love all of you, Alan. I want to learn to love all of those places, those crevasses of fear and projection and blame. I want to learn to love back your arrogance and your pride, your egoism, even in your forays into narcissism, in false certainty. I want to learn to love all of those vulnerabilities and come out of those ridiculously demonic dreams. I want to be in self-worth, self-esteem, self-respect. And so shouting out your hypocrisy, shouting out your narcissism, shouting out your deceit, shouting out your uncaringness, shouting out your cruelty is sort of the first act of forgiving yourself and forgiving others. Study whatever it is that allows you to know yourself in relationship, that cognitive, transparent consciousness, for lack of a better term. Know how you delude yourself through self-deception. Study the machinations of denial, repression, delusion, and do everything you can to imbue the Sanskrit word dharma to inner being and interbeing. And be an empiricist at the edge. That to me is a very challenging, courageous individual who has intellectual freedom and emotional vulnerability simultaneously. We will never ultimately know, I think, our maker, what we're here for, what we're doing. I had a social worker in Australia once come to me and tell me when she went into an Aboriginal camp, she rather presumptuously said to the Aboriginal woman, what can I do to help you? And the Aboriginal looked at her and said, if you're here to help me, please leave. But if you see that your freedom and mine are linked, please stay and we can help each other. And to me, that really represents this inseparableness of liberation. In South Africa, in the absence of Ubuntu, U-B-U-N-T-U, there was apartheid. But when Ubuntu, which is a state of mind called I and other, simultaneously arising with a felt intelligence that what denigrates me denigrates her. Imagine if I lived in that kind of reciprocity of interrelated simultaneity, where I'm feeling you, what elevates your woman friend elevates me. In the absence of that, I'm feeling what denigrates her denigrates me. I think that coming into closeness with each other is a very beautiful form of meditation. So the meditation collective isn't just about coming together to sit and develop personal peace, it's the risk of intimacy. An Austrian psychotherapist, the first psychoanalyst in America, studied with Freud, who was the first translator of Freud's work, introduced a concept in American parlance called torches of freedom. He associated the cigarette
with a symbol of emancipation for women's movement. Isn't that amazing? And Freud's nephew hired models who marched with women's rights. And at the end, when the New York Times photographed these beautiful women smoking torches of freedom, it spread around the country on the New York Times front page that cigarettes liberated you from complacency and indoctrination into patriarchy. Isn't that amazing? The manipulation of consciousness. That people functionally are disenfranchised from their citizenry unknowingly, so that they're convinced of their own liberty all the while that they're manufactured into servitude. And do you follow that? It's the engineering of consent. I find that a fascinating concept. Noam Chomsky's used manufacturing consent. The engineering of consent, actually, if you look back where this concept originated, it was with Freud's nephew. Every one of us in this room are psychopathic in our denial of what we do every fucking day to participate in the death march. And if you don't think that's true, study the data. Overcome your little story of hopium. It ain't gonna work out in any way that we think. No one promised us eternity. No one promised us the comfort of fucking denial-based urban Western civilization. Study history, study empire. I was in war zones. Great people, good-looking people, wealthy people, sexy people, blonde, blue-eyed, clinical PhD girls and boys commit genocide by killing each other. And here the great hoax is the torches of freedom. Our cars and airplanes and nuclear power plants, our iPhones, the dopamine pumps in our hands, likes, swipes, and Instagrams, and all the shit that we do to fucking deny the reality that we're murder machines. Get over your yogic meditative habits and break the coma of compliance with your fear. What will you do with the preciousness of your fucking full breath? All of us in this room today are, in ways, we're mystical activists trying to break free from the centrifugal force of our own egos, at the same time to defy standards of society and culture and nationality, from xenophobia, all forms of toxic discrimination, sexism, the Me Too campaign across all frontiers. We're saying no to conformity and yes to liberty, are we not? Have we really re-inspired that level of revolutionary rebellion? Or are we still meditating to break free from the centrifugal force of my own pettiness? Think of Gandhi, what he did. He took it to the sea. You know, he instigated a thing called civil disobedience. Everywhere he went, he called upon the villagers of his country to stop work. He did the math. There was 100,000 British soldiers and there was 300 million Indians. Imagine if everyone on this island, someone came through and said we should stop work as an act of protest to stop the economy and the war machine. Do you think we would do it? Whoa, whoa, those are very tall orders. We might be called upon at some point very soon to absolutely walk in a way that's so proudly tall that we cannot believe the courage it takes to live in the highest conscience of subversiveness by being erotically true to the beauty of our own preciousness. And we love life so much that we refuse to sit down for it anymore. It's possible that we do what Gandhi did and take that handful of salt and hold it to the sun, symbolic of the courage to be true to a vision called freedom that includes yours and mine together as one. The takeaway from this documentary, what do I want you to have? Well, number one, like The Life of Brian with Monty Python, don't follow me. Think for yourself. I think that's the abiding message, the new religion in the world. Don't follow. Think for yourself. Nobody can work it out for you. Like Bob Marley said,
None but ourselves can free our mind. Dylan, who is not busy being reborn, is busy dying. What is the energy of rebirth? Work it out for yourself. Free your mind. Don't follow anybody. Be at freedom. Dance in your own authenticity. Kiss for the first time. So from my heart to yours, thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for being patient with me. If I've said things that have crossed the line for you, fuck you. We are infinitely embedded in this unbelievable thing called human identity. And it's so diverse that these mind states of who we think we are is like an archipelago sitting on this infinite ocean of mystery. And this infinite ocean of mystery is biologically connected at this very moment to like 500 million cells simultaneously orchestrating. And just beneath that infinite ocean of humankind, we sit on a globe, an ecosphere, a biosphere. Wow, we're a breathing lung. One whole human being species of insects and birds and dolphins and oceans and clouds and sky, bright stars and galaxies upon galaxies, embedded within a submolecular eternity at this very moment that's happening simultaneously in this moment now. And we sit in this mystery thinking that we can figure it out. Think about tonight the message of owning, totally getting that who you are is absolutely enough.
I'm more spiritual than